Going green in transport. Transport is vital to the UK economy, underpinning economic growth, productivity and employment. The transport sector contributes approximately £90 billion annually to the UK's GDP and employs around 7 million people. Overall, the transport industry is a cornerstone of the UK's economic stability and growth. The transport sector is working hard to decarbonise, but still has several key challenges, including a lack of clarity on the chosen fuels to be used, as well as a shortage of alternatively fuelled vehicles to transition to. However, at the same time, the logistics sector still has the responsibility to move the goods that everyone needs everywhere, every day, as well as drive growth across the economy through increased activity and productivity. In today's programme, Executive TV will speak to some of these companies and gain insight into the challenges they face and some of the viable solutions they've brought forward. Peterhead Port Authority is responsible for the management and operation of the Port of Peterhead, which is located in Aberdeenshire, Scotland.
With roots in fisheries stretching back more than 400 years, Peterhead Port Authority is a trust port overseen by a board of trustees. As custodians of the future, the trustees act in the long-term interests of the port and the local community. We operate Europe's largest fishing port with the equivalent capacity within the fish market of around 1 million fish suppers daily. That's around 200,000 tonnes of fish a year. Fishing is very much in the port's DNA, and we also service the traditional oil and gas, renewable, bulk cargo and leisure sectors. Peterhead Port provides a wide range of services to all the different sectors we support. The fish market, for example, is a relatively new facility. It is part of a £51 million port upgrade programme completed in 2018. To complement the market, we now have a new £3.5 million ice factory that can deliver 30% efficiencies per tonne of ice produced compared to its predecessors. We also have a ship lift, a dry dock, and slipway facilities for out-of-water vessel maintenance and repair. Our quaysides provide a wide range of facilities ideal for offshore energy construction, operations, maintenance and logistics. And in support of future wind projects, we have a large area of land perfectly suited for marshalling and storage of mooring and anchoring equipment during project installation.
Clugston Distribution Services is a leading transport service provider and one of the UK and Europe's most recognised road tanker and general distribution brands.
Clugston Distribution has been in operation as a standalone transport company for over 100 years. We run over 100 vehicles, commercial vehicles over at 44 tonnes. They are split across 4 sites across the UK. We are multidiscipline in respect of the types of haulage we do. We also have a general haulage fleet which run curtain-sided trailers, and we specialise in extendable loads up to 24 metres. We move a lot of steel in this way for a various lot of customers across the UK. Within the transport company we also have our own maintenance unit. When I came here many years ago they only did their own maintenance, so I was brought here to look at bringing it into a retail environment, and 34 years later one of the largest, if not the largest, independent workshop in this area for commercial vehicles. We're a DVSA MOT testing station, and we have been for 29 years. We're also a DVSA tachograph repair centre, and we are official dealers, franchise dealers for Renault Trucks UK and Kobo Cisternas tankers from ADR tankers from Spain.
Logistics UK is one of the biggest business groups in the UK, representing the entire industry with members from the road, rail, sea and air industries, as well as the buyers of freight services such as retailers and manufacturers.
Logistics UK is one of the biggest business groups in the UK, similar in size and scale to the British Retail Consortium and the CBI. We support, shape and stand up for safe and efficient logistics, and we're the only organisation that represents all of logistics. So we have 20,000 members across road, rail, sea and air, but not just the organisations that move goods. We also have members from organisations that have goods to move, like retailers and manufacturers.
Sustainability and the transport sector are closely linked. The industry has made significant progress towards becoming greener by adopting innovative methods.
Logistics has a key role to play in sustainability. There are loads of vehicles running across the infrastructure and around the UK. So it's really important that logistics plays its part in cleaning up the air that we breathe and cleaning up the environment. And that's through new choices about fuels, choices about technology, choices about vehicles. And the whole industry really is focused right now on understanding those choices, building the infrastructure, and building a cleaner logistics of tomorrow.
So there has already been some really good progress across the industry in reducing their emissions. So we are seeing trials of new technologies, particularly for HGVs. So our members are trialling battery electric and hydrogen HGVs to see how they work within their operations. We're also seeing significant uptake of low carbon fuels, and that includes for HGVs, but also for aviation and looking at ways to utilise them in shipping and rail. So there is a lot of planning and investment already taking place. And for the areas where there is already technology solutions, particularly for vans, you're seeing fleets already adopting significant amounts of battery electric vans.
With the effects of the pandemic, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and the subsequent inflation the UK still struggles with, the transport industry is struggling to get back on its feet.
The current transport industry has gone through an extremely difficult time. In 2023, we saw over 500 haulage companies go into administration. We have obviously had the effects of the COVID lockdown in 2020. Brexit has also had its bit to play with the loss of many skilled overseas drivers, which we don't now have in the UK. This ultimately forced wages to significantly rise, and we can certainly say from our own point of view that over the last 3 to 4 years, we have seen driver wages increase by nearly 39%. This is also impacted due to the government year on year increasing the minimum wage, which is now at a level where we have to constantly keep moving forwards with the increasing our own pay to our workforce. This then puts a huge impact on our finances, our cash flow and resources to enable us to go out and do the deliveries and operate in a streamlined way in order to make a profit. Many companies have struggled. Many companies are having problems managing their cash flow, and this is something that has had a great effect throughout the industry. 2024 has begun better than the previous few years. We are seeing a slight upturn in volumes. This may be down to a number of factors. Obviously, a gap in the market where so many small, medium and even large hauliers are no longer around, which is very sad to see, but it has enabled some of the rest of us to pick up the pieces and carry on and help maybe to grow into certain sectors. We are looking very much now at growth and taking the business forwards into the next decades with the new technologies and everything that's coming available to us. We would sincerely hope that the Bank of England will cut interest rates very, very soon. This, I think, is very important, especially in light of the fact that inflation has now started to drop. If we can see this happen, then I think the future looks slightly brighter than it did perhaps in the last few years. We hope that the Bank of England are listening.
One cannot speak on sustainability without mentioning the transition to net zero. Net zero is single-handedly the biggest factor in making the transport sector green.
One of our key values is sustainable development, and we strive to balance economic growth with environmental protection and social responsibility. And as an important example, the fishing sector has one of the lowest carbon footprints of any form of high-protein food production. The North Sea and North Atlantic have some of the richest and most sustainable fishing grounds in the world.
Peterhead Port is at the heart of the transition to net zero as a delivery partner in the Acorn project. This is at the pre-development stage at nearby St Fergus.
The Acorn project is a really important project for Scotland. It's aimed at decarbonising industrial and power emitters right across Scotland, taking that CO2 and safely storing it under the ground. In doing so, we help to reach the decarbonisation targets, not only for Scotland but also for the UK. Acorn has a huge number of advantages. The stores that we're planning to use are extremely well understood, and as we mentioned, can store a large amount of CO2 safely underground for a long period of time. We're planning to reuse a lot of existing infrastructure, which helps us manage our costs, and also means that we can develop the infrastructure as needed to meet the requirements of the different emitter projects that will be supplying CO2 from us. The reach of the project is very significant, which means that we can gather CO2 from across all of Scotland, as well as the local emitters here around the Peterhead area, so we have a very large reach. We can make a very significant contribution to delivering decarbonisation for the UK. I think the Climate Change Committee identified that CCUS was a critical technology to allow us to meet our decarbonisation goals, and they can play a huge part in delivering those targets. I think aiming at 20 to 30 million tonnes a year stored for the UK by 2030.
In terms of sustainability, it is important that our company looks heavily at this. We have done our little bit over the years to have solar panels on roofs of buildings. We recycle oils that are used out of engines and various other components that can be reused elsewhere. We are very conscious about maintaining high standards in terms of how we look at keeping things clean and environmentally friendly. We are looking at the future where we feel that we may need to invest in the certain training and skills that are required to go down the lines of engineering of electric vehicles and hydrogen. So these are key areas where we see the company having to invest a lot of money and time into our staff, and probably bringing in new staff, probably investing in new areas where we work, certainly within our workshops, to deliver the carbon footprint that we need. I think it's important. We see it on the news every day. The world is in a dilemma with carbon emissions, predominantly produced from other parts of the world, but we have to do our bit and see that we have been doing it as a leader going forwards. I believe that we are doing our bit as a company in a small way at the moment, but we hope over the next 2 to 3 years to be upscaling significantly and joining other companies that are really pioneering the way forwards for the improved technology that we all need.
Decarbonisation and achieving net zero emissions are often more challenging in practice than in theory. The sector faces numerous obstacles, including high costs and inadequate infrastructure.
Where infrastructure is going to be, how energy is going to be provided. So we really need that roadmap that is jointly produced with industry. The UK has a target to reach net zero by 2050, and that is of course something the industry is aiming for and fully embracing. And there are specific targets the government has set that is relevant to logistics, such as no diesel locomotives being on our railways by 2040, and also trying to encourage more use of sustainable aviation fuel by increasing production and availability in the UK, so very relevant to our sector. Significant barriers and challenges to the industry decarbonising. So firstly, it's all about the cost and investment. So new technologies coming onto the market are significantly more expensive, and for our industry, we need to think about how to keep costs down for consumers. And then, of course, we want to get things from A to B. So for our members, it's also about how efficient new technologies are. So that's something they have to consider. And at the moment, for some parts of the sector, there aren't the right solutions. So for HGVs particularly, the solutions that are being developed have some issues such as reduced payload and not having the charging infrastructure available. So even if an operator adopts a new technology such as a battery electric HGV, at the moment there is limited public HGV charging across the UK, and the same for hydrogen refuelling stations. There is also the challenge if they need to charge at their depots or operating sites. So energy demand is another big hurdle for the sector. So if they need to be charging their HGVs at a depot, or for shipping, and when a vessel wants to plug in at a port, they need significant energy. And at the moment, there isn't a long-term plan about how the energy for these new technologies are going to be in the right places across the UK.
Now is a really exciting time in logistics. It's not just the decarbonisation agenda. There's also the opportunity that connected and autonomous vehicles might bring, using technology to drive down costs and increase safety. But I think it might be some time before we see driverless vehicles going up and down our roads. I think public perception is probably the biggest barrier. The technology is nearly there, the legislation is nearly there, but I think the industry is quite focused on decarbonisation right now.
There's no doubt that the rise in energy prices triggered by international conflict has helped to drive forward the move away from hydrocarbons as a key source of energy. There's much more focus now on alternative green forms of energy such as offshore wind and hydrogen. And these, along with carbon capture and storage, present enormous opportunities for our port. One significant current challenge to our becoming more sustainable as a port is the lack of availability of prompt connections to the electricity grid. For example, we've installed solar panels on our fish market roof, and some of our stakeholders have done likewise on their buildings. However, the timelines for grid connections are long. This makes it difficult to maximise the efficacy of these renewable sources of electricity generation for the port.
As a port, we wait with everyone else to see the direction of travel of future vessel fuels. Whether the long-term answer turns out to be ammonia or hydrogen, electricity or something else, we will adapt the port to support. Peterhead's location at or close to the proposed landfall of the power cables for many of the offshore wind developments, along with the accessibility to water and carbon dioxide supplies, and to land areas close to the port, makes the town a very attractive proposition for green hydrogen and hydrogen derivative production. From a port perspective, this opens up the new opportunity to potentially support both offtake locally from the port and export globally of these commodities.
I think there are a diverse range of challenges in making transport more sustainable, and they cover a spectrum of, let's think about the basics, infrastructure. You know, the infrastructure is not in place for a change in fuel, because that's what we're essentially talking about. The only way to make transportation more sustainable is by changing the fuel source. At the moment it's fossil fuels. If we switch to electricity, we know there are challenges there. If we switch to hydrogen, there are challenges there. To start with, you've got to think about, well, which direction are we going to take? You know, two front runners, electricity and hydrogen at the moment, unless somebody else pops up with another technology. We then have to think about the production, manufacture processes for these. And if we're talking about more than just the everyday vehicle, the car, then we're looking at large haulage, buses, those kinds of transportation. They're bigger, they travel long distances. Those batteries are going to be massive if we go down the electric route. Hydrogen, what does that even look like? For myself, I've never seen a hydrogen engine. I wouldn't have a clue what difference it makes to the vehicles. So I can only imagine the manufacturing processes and what changes would be required within the manufacturing process. We don't just talk about, oh, here's a lorry, off you go. It's understanding all of the background and the start to finish process of providing that truck. Electric vehicles for cars, they're already around and they are growing as a form of transport. I doubt very much whether it will be the way forward for haulage for lots of reasons. But whichever route we take, the infrastructure from start to finish of production to the whole how does that operate on the road, it will all change. It all has to change. So it's a massive culture change as well. I can't even think about how big the task actually is.
With all the challenges that come with decarbonising the sector, the government has an undeniable duty to help ease the transition to net zero. Businesses cannot shoulder the burden of costs that come with decarbonising without government assistance.
Government needs to collaborate with the sector to make sure that we understand what's coming and when it's coming and have time to plan. The sector is best placed really to help government find ways to reduce friction at our borders, as well as still for government maintaining and achieving its political objectives and outcomes. We need the right investment in the right infrastructure to secure the fast and free flow of goods across road, rail, sea and air. So we'd really like to see a long-term plan for logistics infrastructure, also backed up by a 5-year implementation plan locally.
We need continuity of policy, tax and strong incentives to drive inward investment, both in the port network and the wider energy community. We need to talk up our prospects in Scotland, specifically here in the North East, and work cohesively to attract the new investment, creating long-term prosperity and economic benefit for everyone.
I think it's highly critical that the government steps in to help the transport sector become more sustainable. Without doubt, they can help. There needs to be far more funding available for the innovation, for the people who are looking to develop the science and the technology. There needs to be availability and access to the right equipment and facilities to produce that, whether that's through universities or special hubs that are designed for it. I think there has been very little inward investment by the government, maybe a lot of talk, but not a lot of investment. I can give examples of where they make it difficult for you to be able to create new science and technology in this sector. They will give you incentives and then take them away again. And you get halfway down the line of doing something and then there's no funding to continue it. So if they're going to invest, they need to make sure that they're investing in the right projects and that they are supporting the right businesses to enhance the products. And that they see it through, that they don't remove the funding halfway through. Science and technology design is not instantaneous, it doesn't happen overnight, and you don't get overnight results. So there needs to be a long and sustained approach to investing in the innovation, and that starts with the government. I know a lot of private individuals are keen in this area, but it's finding them and matching them up with the right individuals. And I know that those individuals do exist because I've had personal contact with some of them.
Despite the sector's challenges, significant progress has been made in recent years. These positive changes are expected to continue evolving in the coming decade and beyond.
So in the coming decades, logistics industry will be a really exciting place. Firstly, as we move to more zero-emission technologies, we will start to see quieter vehicles and different fuels being utilised across all transport modes. And that means, particularly in a last mile and urban context, we'll start to see vehicles that are quieter and also utilising smaller vehicles or e-cargo bikes.
We will continue to support our stakeholders and their businesses by developing the port for the future. We are very determined to maximise the opportunities which the energy transition is presenting us with. But linking back to our Trustport ethos, Peterhead Port Authority, as custodians of the port, will always seek to make these improvements for the long-term benefit of our stakeholders, the local supply chain and the town and the community.
Clugston Distribution is looking to continue its growth. We operate a fleet of just over 100 trucks now. We are looking to expand the business throughout the UK rather than in the two areas that we've mainly been focused on over the last 10 to 20 years. We've recently opened a depot down in Felixstowe where we will be looking to move bulk food and industrial products not only around the UK but into Europe. Going into Europe will be a new challenge for us, but we have a great team behind us with the know-how and understanding to help deliver that going forwards. We are also looking at spreading our wings into other areas to support transport. I believe it's an exciting time for the company. I believe we've overcome many hurdles over the last few years with the COVID outbreak and all the other disruption that we've had to endure. We've managed to survive that and still stand strong and proud.
The transport sector, responsible for much of the UK's carbon emissions, faces significant decarbonisation challenges. Overall, despite the difficulties, the transport sector is making notable strides towards a greener future, with positive changes expected to continue evolving in the coming years.